In this video, we're going to look at a VUE app, a website using VUE that is going to play a simple, guess the number game, but the numbers are going to be presented as Roman numerals. So if you want the code for this, it's at this URL seen here, and this is what it looks like in operation. So we are going to guess a number between 1 and 100 using this drop-down list of Roman numerals. And then we sort of submit our guess. And so the first number, as I like to cheat, is 67. But let's at least start off proceeding as normal. Like, let me guess 50 to begin with. Break it in half, more or less, and submit the guess. And it's saying that that was too low. So next I'll go for 75, XXV, there we are. And that was too high. And then let's go for the 67. So that's here, LXVII, submit that guess. And then it says, I got it. The guessing button has disappeared. The picture of the girl has appeared, and a reset button has appeared. So a button disappeared, a picture appeared, and a button appeared. And then if I press that button, then I'm getting a new number, 31 this time, that I'm going to try to get. And so it starts all over again. So let's try 30. And that was too low. And 32. And that was too high. And 31. I got it. Okay. All right. So let's have a look. Okay. So again, there was the code if you want it. Here is the script taking us up to the CDN for VUE. There is a bit of style, not much, just some coloring and some padding, what have you. Nothing terribly interesting. We apply the view to an element on the page, a container, and then everything in there gets the view code, gets applied there. And at the bottom down here, we're applying it to the element with an ID of guess. And so here's the div with an ID of guess. We have a select. And so the select, drop-down select has normally in the normal JavaScript HTML, we talk about it having a value, but here we'll use the V model. And that says that the value of this dropdown is automatically connected to the value of a property within the view. So hop over here to view, and there is a user guess. So that says that what's chosen in the dropdown is by this V model connects it to the property user guess and gives it that value of the select. Okay, now I have to figure out what my options are, and here is where I'm going to loop. So I have an array of numerals, Roman numerals. They were over here in my data. And so I just have an array of Roman numerals. Let me get rid of the CSS. I don't need that. And so I am creating options by using a V4, looping over the elements of an array in numerals. And here's my open option and my close option, and I'm displaying the item, which is the Roman numeral. Okay. Then I have down here a button. I'm using an input of the button type. Remember that these buttons come and go, and so there is a VF. I have a property, which is a boolean called display. And if I am not displaying, then you will see this button. And that's sort of displaying the results, the not the history as we go, but the sort of the girl and the new button is. So we should have a display. There's display and it starts as false. So we saw this. So it display starts as false. So not display is true. And we see this button. It's the submit guess button, and it calls an on click called make guess. So there must be a method over in VUE called make guess. We'll just pop over to see that it exists, and then we'll examine it more detail in a bit. But here are my methods, and one of my methods is make guess. And then I have start new. So I have two buttons. Each button calls a method, one to make a guess and the other one to start a new game. So that was the first button, the make guess button that starts off, because display starts off false. This one, which is the if not display, then it comes up when we start. I have a history of guesses. So here's my history of guesses, 3 guesses so far. That is here. So here in the header, I have an array in my data of tries, and I'm just displaying the length of that tries. So that's that 3. And again, let's look over here and up in data. There was an array of tries that starts off as an empty array. Okay, so then we have the ordered list, and there are a set of list items, and that is gotten by looping over the tries. And so tries was an array, so I'm looping over the array. X is the sort of dummy index of the iterations through the array tries. And the tries we're going to see is an array of objects, and those objects have 2 properties: the value of the guess and the status, whether it was too high or too low. So we see the guess and whether it was too high or too low. And so that was a V4. Then we have an image, which is shown based on display. So we don't see it initially, and then at the end of the game, we do see it. And that is the got it image. We have an input, which is VF display. So again, this is when the game is won, when the game is over. We're displaying this button to reset the game, and it calls our second method, start new. And then we have a connection to our code, guess.js. So that was the HTML. Now let's have a more thorough look at the JavaScript. So we looked at, as we were going, a bunch of the data, but let's review. The data had the array of numerals and filled the dropdown, and initially an empty array for the user's guesses, that attempts. There is the current guess that we will sort of gather the information for. There is the target, which is the initial for subsequent rounds, it will get changed, but for the first round, it was 67. I like to, when I'm designing something like this with randomness in it, I like to at least know what it is so I can be a good, clever player. And then the display started as false. So we were seeing the first button, but not the image and not the second button. We had 2 methods, make guess and start new. Make guess, we were alerting the user's guess. So the user's guess was the V model that came out of the drop-down select. So we were seeing the user's guess. And then I want to, again, I have this complication of that what the user sees are these Roman numerals, but my target is in a decimal number. That's one complication. The other complication is, of course, that my numbers are starting at 1, but array indices start at 0. So I also have this sort of off by one thing I have to account for. So I take the user's guess, which is an individual Roman numeral, and then I look for it. I use index of to find it in the set of Roman numerals. And then I'm going to sort of create this object of the user's try. And I'm adding one to the position because, again, the array index started at 0, but the number started at 1. And so if the if the user's guess adding 1 to the index was less than the target, we're saying too low, and we're alerting too low and also setting the status to too low. If it was greater than the target, we're saying alerting too high and getting the status of too high. And if they got it, then we are not alerting anything, but we are changing the property display. And all these things, when we're changing the data, it's always this dot target, this dot display. So this dot display equals true, and the user status was got it. And then we get the value of the user try. So again, user try is an object. So we're getting a status property and a value property. And then we're pushing it, the user's try, onto the array of guesses. And that's all we do when they make a guess. And then here is the function for starting a new game. We empty out the tries. We set display equal to false. So we're showing the guess button. We clear out any user guess. We use the math library to generate a new random number. And we alert it because I like to cheat. And then all is for naught if you don't do the last line of taking all this code and using the mount method to associate it with the page, in particular, the element with an ID of guess. So that's what I wanted to show you. Drop-down list associated with an array. So we had a drop-down list that was generated from an array using a V4. We were grabbing a guess. Let me reset. We were grabbing a guess and using a button, and that was adding to our history of tries, and so on. So we could play a simple game with our knowledge thus far of VUE. That's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for your